Hey, bro.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Great. Sound really good.
All right, great.
Right on. Welcome, brother.
Hey, thanks, man. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. How's your Saturday morning starting off?
Not too bad. Got a new dog. So she's a puppy, and I've never done puppies before. We always done rescue. So
Mm.
it's been, I got out of the shower and she's like trying to bite my toes. And I'm like, get off my toes. She's a old English bulldog. So she's just like rambunctious and
Right.
getting used to that.
And those little toes can be sharp sometimes.
Oh, yeah. They
Yeah.
are like little needles.
Yeah. That's some serious stuff. Kittens can be like that too. I had one kitten, a wild one that I found on the street abandoned. This was in West Africa in Senegal. So even worse, because the street animals there are much more vicious than in the US.
Oh, yeah.
Because they just literally just scrounge and live off the streets, and they have a hard life. I'd hate to be a cat in Africa. I mean, it's so yeah, but that cat, boy, it could scratch and bite. It was just a kitten, but it was really vicious, but for it was playing, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't see the issue.
What
um
were you over there for? Were you in there in the service?
no, I was actually mostly doing development work. I was working for USAID, United States Agency for International Development, federal government diplomat.
Okay.
Yeah. um So
Is that
doing
what you,
development work. Yeah, that's
so
pretty much what I do. Yeah.
that's
That's pretty much
awesome.
what I used to, I mean, I spent about 10 years with USAID, um, and now I do contracting. So now I'm outside of the government and I'm working for a firm that does contracting and mostly evaluating development projects in the world. So we bid on those types of activities, usually is like evaluations or learning activities or analysis or monitoring, evaluation, data, analytics, stuff like that. And basically just try to judge the projects and, give recommendations for how to improve programming. So it's cool.
That is cool. What got you
Yeah.
into that? Just out of
Uh,
curiosity.
well, wait a minute. Hey, wait, who's interviewing now? Just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, well, it's just kind of serendipity because I had actually moved to Africa in 2005 out of a love for the culture. I had been there traveling to visit twice to study drumming, traditional African drumming, the djembe in particular, in Senegal and Mali. And I just fell in love with the culture and I was so happy there. And it was just much less stressful in a way to me, more freedom
Yeah.
and a lot of fun. And I was learning so much, so I wanted to live there. I wanted to go back. So I made just a leap of faith and moved with my family there with some savings I had. And in the beginning, I was doing, trying to do like creative things like sell drums online and, traditional mud cloth or African artistic things. And then I started doing like a bed and breakfast where I had people come, from all over the world who really were into like the drum and wanted to study it seriously. And I would be their facilitator, like the host of their experience, basically, and hook them up with the best teachers around, bring them to ceremonies, go out and have beers, go travel to the village. It was an amazing experience.
That
Um,
sounds the best thing ever, if I'm
it
being
was the best thing ever. I was kind of like an cultural anthropologist, like informally, I guess. And I ended up just meeting randomly for drinks. A friend of mine ran into the mission director for USAID in Mali when I was living in Mali. And he was like, "Oh man, Jeremy, I met this the mission director, and he wants to, go out and have a drink or something, go watch some live music. You want to come?" And I was like, "What? The mission director of USAID? How the hell do you know that guy?" I
right.
mean, and he's like, "No, he's cool. It's not what you think. He's really, cool guy, and I think you'd like it, and it might be good." And the way he said that it might be good, I got the sense that he was trying to tell me, dude, think about opportunities here. I mean, you need some money. You've been living in Africa struggling. He might have some work for you or something because, I have an IT background too. So we went out for drinks and he, asked me what I did. He was really cool, really down to earth guy. In fact, I named my, my third son after him, Alex. And I told him I used to do database programming in Microsoft Access. I've done some web design, digital video editing, and he saw a website I had for my drumming, and I had videos up. And this was like in 2005 when it was kind of like not as common to have like video and stuff on your website.
Yeah.
And so, and I told him I did GIS, geospatial mapping, and he was like, listen to this. He's like, shit, we need all of this. We need all of these skills in the mission. We need to redo our website. We need this and that. So anyway, long story short, they had created a position. I applied for it and won. And that's how I got into development work, which is really odd. I would have never planned that. I mean, I'm a social scientist, so I have a background in psychology and philosophy and religion primarily.
That is the coolest thing ever, man.
Yeah. We should go to Africa together sometime.
I mean, I've never been to Africa, so you're the guy to go with.
There you go.
Let's go.
It's an amazing experience. Yeah. I've been, I don't even know how many countries I've been in Africa from work, but I've been around the block, probably 15 to 20 countries, something like that. So it's insane. Wow. It can be exhausting too. Anyway, bro, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
it's a real privilege and an honor. I have to say that your Whence Came You podcast was one of the first Masonic podcasts that I kind of got into. And so, yeah, it's a real privilege to be talking to you. I was kind of one of your fans on the sidelines there for a little while.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I just liked, that you had a deeper approach. You were really trying to probe and go into some of the deeper sides of Masonry, and you were doing it in a very balanced and analytical fashion. You were researching, you were sharing your research. You're very open about things, about even your challenges, what you're trying to figure out. And so, yeah, kudos, bro, and keep going. Don't quit ever. Obviously.
Thanks. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So let's talk about you, man.
Sure.
Because I kind of like this to be a more personal type show. We get to know the brother, and then we get into some deeper conversations. But so I'd like to start off by if you could just tell us who is Robert Johnson? Is it RJ that you prefer or Robert? First of all,
RJ actually started with my boss back in 2002. Up to that point, I just went by Robert, and that was fine. But my boss, Greg Garcia, the best photographer I've ever known. I say that because I'm really into photography, and he just called me RJ. We would go play music after work and hang out, and he called me RJ, and it just kind of stuck. And then it took a little break for a little while because where I was working previous to where I work now, which was a regional airport that's gone national now. So congrats to them. But working on airplanes and whatnot. And when I got to the new job, my new team, there was a guy named Rob Robinson, Robert Bogue, and Robert Johnson. And so they just started calling Rob Robinson the coach because he coached after school, me, RJ, and then Rob Bogue got to keep his name.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I know how that works sometimes. I mean, I have a similar problem with one brother. I have another Jeremy in my lodge, and we often have to say, okay, which Jeremy? Jeremy Chevrier or Jeremy Anspo? So yeah, I know how that goes. So tell me about your from your childhood, not, the long story, the short story, but a little bit about where you were raised and, what you were into, and then how that sort of led to getting into something as weird as Freemasonry.
Yeah, super weird.
Super weird.
So my family, I was born in Illinois, and my dad was a bricklayer. My mom worked for the Navy Exchange. And she was just really involved with the Navy for many years because my granddad was in the Navy, and she had moved around a lot with them. And so I moved a lot between Illinois and Southern California, Orange County, Garden Grove to be exact.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Garden Grove's, I guess, where my heart is all the time. And anyway, we would go back and forth quite a bit. And then my mom separated from my dad, and we were living with my grandparents in Orange County in California. And she started corresponding with this guy, Tom, and Tom used to be her Navy exchange boss, like many years prior. So they started a relationship. Then they got married in Las Vegas, and we moved to Naples, Italy when I was like,
Yes.
I don't know,
Give me some
8.
pizza. I want pizza. I went there.
Oh,
Awesome.
yeah.
I
I
had a
mean,
lot of fun in Naples.
if you want pizza,
I know.
it
Yeah.
as an 8-year-old kid, okay, keep in mind, like, pizza night at the Gaeta family, the Johnson family, a Chapin family was, if you're in Southern California, you go to Little Caesars.
Right.
Yeah. And so, uh,
Yeah, Little
when
Caesars is pretty good for like a chain pizza place, actually. It's pretty
dude,
tasty. I like it.
it gets crapped on all the time, yet it is the only, well, one of the only franchise pizza places that makes sauce in-house, shreds cheese in-house, makes dough in-house.
No wonder it's so good.
I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
everybody can crap on it all day. You want to say, oh,
Yeah.
it's cheap pizza, but it's fresh pizza.
No, you're absolutely right. In terms of the chains, I think Little Caesars is my favorite personally. And I'm from upstate New York. So I grew up
Oof.
around Italians.
There are people who are going to be after you for saying that.
I know. And I love New York pizza. But
Yeah.
Napoli is like so next level,
It really is. And when I started eating, so we went to dinner like the first time, and Tom, my dad, he just was like, "Oh, we'll get you a cheese pizza," and I'm like, "What's a margarita pizza?" Like, I don't
plain, right?
Well, like margarita, I'm thinking, drinks. I don't know.
Oh, right. Got it. Okay.
And so they bring out this margarita pizza. I'm like, oh, it's plain cheese, but looks a little different, whatever. What's this green stuff? So I'm like, ugh, it's okay. And then after the stint in Naples, we came back to the States because my dad got lung cancer. He was he had been a lifelong smoker, so he got lung cancer or whatever. And we came back to San Diego, and he was getting treatment there. And one of the first things we did when we came back, I was like, oh, sweet, I'm going to have pizza again. I took a bite and I was like, what is this slop?
Yeah. Trash. Complete trash. I can't stand Domino's. I'm just not into that at all.
You're not into Domino's, man.
I can't eat that. I don't like it. Yeah, I don't know the sauce or whatever. It's been years since I've had it because I don't like it.
Well, you got to retry it because they changed everything.
Did they change everything?
Everything,
okay,
man.
Maybe I'll give it a chance.
They had the most successful customer satisfaction relaunch. They took all their feedback and then did everything, and then went back to the people who gave them crap feedback and said, "How about now?" And they said,
"Interesting. Okay, well,
you gotta check it out."
Yeah, people can change. Companies can change.
Yeah, we'll see.
There's hope. Yeah, COVID can go away. A golden age can come.
That's right. That's right.
I'm really hoping for that too.
I think everybody right now is so ready for the good news, and then every time good news comes out, some media, reports that, oh, not really as good as we thought.
Yeah, back inside.
Back inside, get back inside. Hey, you better wear that mask or we're going back to phase 1.
Yeah. These are really crazy times. I mean, I think a lot of people are kind of cracking. People are just exploding and stuff. And I've felt it myself sometimes. Like, God, that's not like me to act that way. Why am I getting so upset? What happened? What's going on? We're all getting possessed or something? I mean, it's just really weird.
Yep, that's right. A good friend of mine has a spouse who has they were having like panic attacks and things leading up to recently. They had a real issue where the spouse had to be taken to the hospital, and I think this is all just due to the increased stress that everybody has right now. And yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, and
But
the stress is not, I think a lot of it is just this underlying sense of insecurity and not understanding or knowing what's going on and where we're headed.
yeah, kids are so honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other day we were discussing with my son. I called all my sons into the office here and I said, okay, let's talk about go back to school. You have two options. You can do this
Right.
limited at home or you can do all at home. And my son was like, I want to say that I want to do the mixed option because um, yada, yada, you name the
He
reason.
wants to see his friends or whatever, a little
Exactly.
social. Yeah.
Yep. Well, it turns out that the school, after receiving all of the input from everybody, they decided anyway, first trimester, all online learning again.
Same thing happened to me in Virginia here. Same
Yeah.
thing. We got that same question. I responded. My son said, let's do the half part-time school, part-time home. And then they came back and said, we're doing it all online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a real bummer for him, but to your point, that underlying insecurity, my son, like I said, they're so honest with everything. He said, Dad, I would just be so much more secure if they could give me a solid date. I just want to know when this is going to be over, right?
Right.
And I'm just
Right.
like, man, we all know when we can go back to work, when I can get out of this house and I don't have to, have three stupid computers open here and working from home and doing this and doing that, everybody's just it's hurting a lot of folks.
It is. It is. And, but, I think at the same time, it's a time of real inner work and potential spiritual transformation, whenever you're going through, a period of crisis, there's always growth that occurs.
Yeah, that's true. Like with businesses, right? Like every time something happens in a business that seems to be of a negative impact, it's never quite spun as a negative impact. It's said, wow, look what happened. Look what it shined a light on, right? Almost like a SWOT analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Look what it shined a light on to say, hey, this is where we have this weakness. Maybe this is a real opportunity now that we've been shown this to improve, right? And that just leads back to people, and people should really try to remember, life is the greatest teacher.
Yeah.
But people never. Well, I shouldn't say they never. There's just a lot of people who go day to day and keep asking themselves why something happens, and we're not really looking at what we're doing to instigate the things that have happened.
That's very true, bro. So I don't want to detract too much because I could tell already that the conversation with you is going to be super easy. You're an experienced podcaster, so you're comfortable, and that's great. And but you were talking about your move to Napoli, and
Oh yeah,
I want to bring it back to how you got into masonry and track
sure.
that.
Yep. So, while we were in Italy, my dad was really big on showing me all of the sites and taking me to Florence, and we went to Herculaneum and Pompeii and all these places.
Oh man!
And I got so interested in previous civilizations, particularly, something that really stuck out to me was um, in Herculaneum and Pompeii that they had, like working sewage essentially. And I was just like, what?
Yeah.
Like how we're always, and of course I'm like 9 years old or whatever. And I'm just thinking like, how do they have this kind of stuff at this far back? And then I start reading more and more and more. My dad would just be like, oh, hey, you want to know about Egypt? Here's a book. I mean, I still got my first book I ever got on Egypt sitting on the shelf. My dad got for me, and then I got a copy. He gave me a book on. It's still a required reading for Harvard courses on biblical studies. It's the book on the top shelf all the way to the middle left. It's kind of orange, but it's called The Ancient Middle East. And that's like, I don't know what edition it is, but after reading that, I started thinking, wow, this is crazy. And you start coming up with ideas in your head, and then those ideas kind of echo chamber later on when you see certain shows that talk about, you know, possible technological advances that prior civilizations have had.
Hmm.
The thought,
Oh, wait, Joe Martinez's ears are perking up right now, by the way.
yeah, I'm sure they are. Where these these civilizations essentially are may have not been more advanced than we are today, but
Mhm.
definitely know how to do something that we don't know how to do today, either because we've never been asked to do it, or we're locked in our understanding of how something works, right? And that's
Mm.
not really it's only it's just the way our minds work, right? Like we know how flight works today based on how we figured out how to fly. And so now we know that's successful. We don't spend other time looking at other ways to do that. Um,
That's true. That's really good.
so,
Yeah,
but
it's a good
so
point.
I was thinking about all that stuff, and then when we moved back to the States, this is when I found out my mom was a little bit new agey, right?
Mm.
So I started looking through, I started reading a lot, and my seeing what books my mom had and my dad had,
Wait,
and
which one was it? Your mom that was with the Navy Exchange?
my mom was in the Navy Exchange. My stepdad was in the service. And
Okay.
then he was actually the like the director of all the Navy exchanges or something at the time that they got
Okay.
married. But so I like would look at their bookshelf. My mom had all these Shirley MacLaine books, and I just remember growing up going, uh,
Yeah.
crystals, incense, and Shirley
Yeah.
MacLaine.
Right. Right. Yeah.
What's with this new age garbage? This
Right.
is,
Right. Right. Right.
and I think it's just really interesting as I when we moved back to the States, my dad, he passed away like, I don't know, 6 or 7 months after we moved back. Um, and
From
then,
Napoli to the States.
yeah, so like 7 months after starting treatment here in the States, we were down at Miramar in
Okay.
San Diego. And it just went bad. And he had ended up passing away. And then after he passed away, my mom said, let's move back to the Midwest. And I was not excited about that at all because my friends and everything were in California, of course.
Mm.
All of my whole family's still there. Only my
And
mom.
California's cooler too, right? Not
California.
temperature wise, but you know what I
Oh
mean.
yeah, we are super cool in California.
Yes.
We say plaza, not plaza.
Right.
um, but yeah, so we moved back to the Midwest here, and my mom was not a fan of the public schools that were available. So um, I went to a Lutheran academy for a few years, and that was interesting, right? Like my whole family is they're all Roman Catholic. They came over from Sicily in like 1918 through Palermo, and so they.
Wait, sorry. So
Yeah,
your mom's side is
yeah,
Italian? Okay,
yeah.
got it. Because Johnson doesn't sound so Italian.
Nope, nope. My dad is 100% England.
There you go.
So much so, we did the ancestry.com, and I was like, wow. It says, your DNA is from Herefordshire, England, and
Yeah,
basically it's strong enough that you could have been born there. And I was like, oh, cool.
yeah.
But it's neat. It's got like this lineage tracer, right, where you can kind of see where your DNA traces from, and then like where it originates. And mine is in Kashmir, India.
No shit.
I was like,
You
that's
know,
awesome.
maybe I got to look at that lineage tracer feature. I don't remember that, but I've also used Ancestry. I got my DNA tested in a couple places, and I've used Ancestry for about 10 years to just do research into
Yeah.
genealogy for my family.
it's
Fascinating.
it's really cool stuff. But
It is. It is. You get to know yourself a little better
yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
Yeah.
I got interested in it just based on I wanted to know what I could, like. I'm a fan of uh, like cultural foods that you might be
Yes.
predisposed to based on like where your DNA's from.
That's very interesting. Hmm.
So
So
I
you
was like,
love Indian food?
I do love Indian
So
food,
do
and I
I.
love Mediterranean food. More
There you
than
go. I like Mediterranean. I like Indian. I like Thai. I like Italian,
yeah,
which is
it's
kind
all
of
good.
Mediterranean.
So we got back to the Midwest. I was in Lutheran academies, and that's where it was interesting too, right? Because we're the Roman Catholicism side of the family. It's very superficial, yay Jesus and everything at home. But in mass and things, it was like really mystical,
Hmm.
And then the Lutheran was not as mystical because I had to attend church services and things as part of going to school. And the Lutheran services were a little bit different, not as mystical, but way more the word, right? Exegesis, right? There's just um, the amount of biblical studies that we had to undertake and really look at passages and what they mean in terms of context was like,
Hmm.
this is so different.
Yeah.
And then after a while, I was getting in trouble a lot because every night there was like these things where I would have to memorize a Bible verse or whatever,
Hmm.
and I would never do it. But my teacher would always start on the far left side of the room, and I sat on the far right side, and he'd just go up and down, and people would be reciting it, each person up and down. And so by the time he got to me, I had it. It was really easy.
That's funny, man.
And but the one time I didn't have it was when they had to recite, all the books of the Old and New Testament. Like you would have to say them all in order or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I think I got like 13 books in before I failed. And then so I had to stay after class. And I remember my Pastor Vogel said, "You just can't come in here and break my rules, Robert." And I was like, "Whatever, old man."
Yeah.
And so I had to walk. I did this walk of shame out to my mom's car, who would pick me up from school. And she said, "What do you mean you can't? You can't go home yet?" I'm like, "I got to memorize the books of the Bible real quick." And she's like, "You don't just memorize the books of the Bible real quick." I'm like, "Mom, give me 20 minutes."
Yeah.
So I went back inside, memorized those real quick, recited them, and I was like, "Bye." And then I told my mom what was up, and she's like, "You're never going back there again." So then I went to public school and got really into UFOs and cryptozoology and Atlantis and
When was that? Like, what was the year
oh man,
frame
that was probably
range?
like 5th grade, 6th grade.
What year was that?
That would have been 19 92, 93, 94, something like that, probably. Well, no, I was
Wow.
born in 81.
Man, you could be my son.
I
No,
could be your son.
I'm thinking because I graduated from high school in '89.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I could, but you don't look like you're
Could you be my son though? Could you?
maybe.
Would
How
you
thick's
want
your
to be my
beard?
son? That's probably the
How
harder
thick is
question
your
to answer.
beard?
How thick is it? It's
Yeah,
pretty thick.
Dad. Um,
Shh. Top
yeah.
secret.
So,
It was a
so
Navy project. I don't want to get into it.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So the whole thing just turned into Sunday mornings. I would, um, through school or whatever, all the things kids do. But on Sunday mornings, I'm here in the Midwest. I live today probably 15 miles where I grew up, and I would spend, my weekends really reading about ancient history and seeing what was mentioned in books, and then actually pulling a Bible off the shelf or pulling a Quran off the shelf and looking at it and going, "Oh, I
Hmm.
don't know if it says that or not, or are they just implying something?" I've got old religious books with like notes on the side from
Yeah. Yeah.
from when I'm like 13 years old. I still have an old set of encyclopedia or um, not encyclopedias. It's like map books
Mm.
where I opened up and I found Area 51 and highlighted Groom Lake before it was like right when Bob Lazar had come out initially.
Hmm.
talking about Area 51 and all this stuff. It was really wild. But I was into all that stuff. I would spend my Sundays watching, In Search of episodes and Ripley's
Hmm.
Believe It or Not with Jack Palance.
Oh
And
yeah, I remember that. I loved In Search of with Leonard Nimoy.
yes, man,
That
that
was
was
so
like,
cool. I love that
it was
show.
the show,
I
man.
know. It was amazing.
It was the coolest.
You probably like Twilight Zone. I don't know if that's too early for you, but I used to
No,
love
dude.
Twilight Zone.
So my two favorite shows of all time are Star Trek, the original series. 'Cause
Yes.
I loved
The
I love
original series, yeah.
yeah, I'm a big Western and outer space person. Um, and I loved all the social justice stuff that they tackled,
Mm, yeah.
kind of discreetly.
Yeah.
Um, and I love my other favorite show, of course, was Twilight Zone, which did the same exact thing.
Yeah. Twilight Zone was phenomenal. I mean, there's just nothing like it. It was so, I mean, it opened the door for, a lot of weirdness later that came, like even David Lynch and such. I mean, they probably owe
Yeah.
something to Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone, like to me, if I had two favorite fiction writers, they are Ray Bradbury and
Rod Serling.
Rod Serling. Yeah,
Rod Serling's from my hometown.
Rod Serling, like to this day, you can mention Rod Serling, and I get the same feeling. You know that old joke where people are like, "Oh, you could be having the greatest day in the world," and then you'll know the kind of person you are if somebody mentions the library at Alexandria burning, and you get pissed off still.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
that same
Damn it.
feeling I get with Rod Serling because he died so young.
Yeah.
And I'm just
So
like,
we'll never know what he could have produced or what would have happened later, He was a genius. For
a
sure.
real literal genius. There's
Yeah.
nobody who could have tackled what he tackled in that time. It's like
Yeah.
Winston Churchill said, diplomacy is telling people to go to hell and they look forward to the trip. The network was
Oh, I
like,
love that.
in Rod Serling's time, right? You can't have an interracial kiss on TV, but here's Rod Serling, saying, here's this week's episode. And the network going, oh, thanks, Rod. We really appreciate that. Oh, anything we got to worry about here? He's like, nothing at all. Just a really great science fiction tale. And then
Right.
they're like, cool, right? And then they put it on the air and the network's like, whatever. They're blind to the fact that he just made an incredible social statement in a
True.
serious way.
Right. And he opened our minds in a lot of ways to a lot of things that, we wouldn't normally think about. And I found some of his episodes frightening. I mean, and scary. Because that's the kind of stuff that scares me. It's more that kind of like borderline psychological, religious scariness, where it's like an existential fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was.
I always think of that episode with the guy lost his glasses. He loved to read and always wanted to be alone.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was time now.
I know. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So anyway, God, so how'd you get into Freemasonry, man? So you're getting there. You got the UFOs going on. We're in Rod Serling territory. You're getting closer, warmer.
Yeah, so my mind was always just like really open to things and studying origins. And then, of course, when you get into things like Star Trek, which I think the similar thread of philosophy kind of really runs through all of the episodes. Of course, it's masked in some way as a TV show still, and there's all of that Hollywood behind it. But really, like the underlying questions and the issues that come up with the characters in these shows, like Twilight Zone or TOS, are questions that are existential questions that deal with a lot of stuff that are in religions and philosophies. It's like you're reading all these things, and yet it's all just kind of like, cool, you handed me these questions. I guess I'll just set it over here and go about my life and play some more Crash Bandicoot or whatever you were doing when you were a kid. And when I moved back to California, it was probably 2002 after I graduated high school. 2000, married my wife in 2002. And I took her back to California. That was kind of the stipulation. I said, if we get married, well, I'm moving, whether you're with me or not. So let's keep this relationship or ditch it. And she was like, I'll go with you. And I said, okay, cool. So we got married, moved back to California, and I got a job working at a photo lab where I met Greg Garcia. And Greg Garcia, coolest boss I had ever had. And
No relation to Jerry Garcia.
no relation to Jerry Garcia. Well, maybe. I don't think so, though.
Yeah, you never know, huh?
He is an incredible, Greg is an incredible musician along with his brother, Chris. Um, well, the Greg interviewed and hired this guy named Yukitaro Hamada, who was a Japanese artist, and Yuki for short. And he was such an interesting guy. He was all these paintings and stuff, and I would go over his house and he would show you the stuff he's working on or whatever. And he'd come over my house and we'd play guitars for a while and we'd hang out, and just an incredible soul. And one day he handed me this book, and it was like Freemason tapestries. And I was like, what is this? And I was kind of looking through this book, and I see an image depicting kind of the culmination in terms of dramatic stuff of the third degree. And I was like, what is going on there? And so then I got on Wikipedia, and this would have been like 2005 or 6. And I get on Wikipedia and I start reading it, and it's really ambiguous. It's like Freemasons work. And I'm like, work on what?
Right.
It's like I couldn't really tell from what the wiki article was. I could read the Wikipedia article today, and like, your mind fills in the blanks because I've been doing it for 12 years.
Right.
But back then I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I got into it, and I went and I knocked on the door of a lodge in Orange, California. I was about to like knock on it for real. And then I read some plaque on the wall, and it said something like, it had some interesting directions, but it was really specific about like the third Thursday or whatever. And that was like the first thing I'd ever like saw a meeting schedule like that. And I was like, oh, that's really specific and kind of weird. I guess maybe I don't have time for this right now. So I got home and I sent an email to the Grand Lodge of California, and I got another email back, and I had some interesting information that I printed and read and just kind of archived it. And a funny story was, just a couple months ago, I searched my email and found that initial email. It was from the guy who responded to my initial inquiry in Freemasonry was Adam Kendall, who is renowned speaker in Masonry today and researcher. He was in Johnny Royal's film, the Illuminati film. And I was just like, holy cow. I've moderated 2 panels with Adam now. And it turns out he was like the first. So I called him one night and we talked for over 2 hours, into the wee hours of the morning. Just me calling him back to go, did you know you were the first guy? So I didn't join in Orange. I moved to Illinois. We moved back here after my son was born in 2007, my first son. And that's when I sent an email to the Grand Lodge of Illinois, and they put me in contact with the secretary of Waukegan Lodge, good old Carl Donahue. And I don't know, 12 years later, I am.
The rest is history. Yeah. I remember the first time I, walked up to my lodge, because same thing. I found out like, oh, it's a, second Tuesday of the month or whatever it is at this time. But I remember like being a little bit like almost scared, like a little nervous, like there was a trepidation. Like, I don't know anybody. This is awkward going in there alone. Yeah. It was, I found that to be part of the challenge, of actually knocking on the door, having the guts to do it. Because they were also a little bit mysterious. Like, who are these people? Is this okay? What am I getting into when I knock on the door? It was just so much I didn't know. And of course I walk in and it's the wrong Tuesday. So I'm all dressed up in a suit, and there's like some guys in there. There's like 4 guys in there just like casual. And they all look up at me when I come in. I'm like, hi, I'm here. I heard there was a meeting. I'm kind of interested to learn more about Freemasonry and stuff. It was just awkward, they're like, oh yes, yeah, this is the right place, but it's actually the wrong day. It's next Tuesday or whatever, the dinner. I was
That's
like, oh
hilarious.
man. Yeah. But they were really nice.
The guy I went through my degrees with. We didn't have like joint degrees, but we had just come in, at similar times. And he had joined my lodge as opposed to the other lodge that met in the same building, because when he showed up on a meeting night, there were like 4 guys and they only had like barely any lights on because they were just sitting around having coffee instead of meeting. Um, and I still remember Eric. Eric's the guy I'm talking about. Eric said, and I just knew at that point, no, this is not what I'm into. He's like,
offer you green
something
beans?
Something in my head told me to go to a different lodge and check it out. But yeah.
So, okay. So let's get into some of these other bullets I got. There's some things that would be interesting to discuss. So first of all, I mean, you've got your own podcast, Whence Came You, which I mentioned in the beginning. You've also been part of the Masonic Roundtable, I think from the beginning, right? Or early on.
Right.
That's right. So so how many years of experience now do you have doing Masonic podcasting in total?
In total, I'll tell you right now, because I can never remember. I always want to say like 2013, but I think we're at
it's like 4 or 5 years, or
no
more.
I think we've been doing it since like 2011. If I'm
oh my God, that's a long time.
Yeah, well, so Masonic Roundtable started, I guess back in, that would have been 2013 or 14, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Whence Came You podcast, we've been doing since I think 2011 or something, almost 10 years, almost the same amount of time I've been in Masonry. I've been doing the podcast, which, if I were looking at Robert Johnson as somebody else, I would have been like, how audacious. Like, you just become a Mason and you become a podcaster about Freemasonry. And, my whole, July of 2011 was our first episode of Whence Came You. I had always just thought like, well, it wasn't that I was talking about Freemasonry, as an expert. Really, the whole point of Whence Came You was, my Masonic mentor, the guy who taught me my catechism, that is, had passed away, and he had this bumper sticker that he loved. And every time it would like get crusty and old, he'd replace it, and it just said "Whence Came You," and that was all. And so I named the show after his bumper sticker. It's kind of an homage, but the whole point was like, let me take you on the journey with me, because basically, nothing against my lodge or those dudes, but nobody told those dudes anything. So they don't know to tell me anything. And the things I'm interested in, right, they're mostly in texts. They're mostly online, and they're everywhere but in my lodge. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to read a paper, what if I just recorded a paper and then I put it out there for anybody else who wanted to listen to the paper who doesn't have time to read, because I'm busy also. And I put up like the first paper I got, which was from something that was in the Masonic world, was Freemasonry, Secret or Not Secret. And I read it and I recorded it and I threw it up, and in like a couple of weeks it had some ridiculous amount of downloads.
Wow.
And at that point I was doing it like every other week, every couple weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I got my first email. Somebody had like figured out how to email me, and it was like, yo, I'm a trucker, I'm on the road. It was really great to hear this because I haven't been to lodge in like 5 or 6 years. Thanks. And I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's
always nice though. It's always nice to be appreciated, to know someone's enjoying your show.
Yeah. And so I've gotten messages like that over the years that, I kind of file in another folder in my email. I keep them, and they are inspirational. They say, hey, even though you figured some of this stuff out, there's innumerable dudes out there who are still unsure of a concept, or don't know about something, or are looking for something more. And so, Whence Came You podcast is really a podcast that's just meant to um, continue a learning journey, continued education,
Yeah.
and generally, promote the craft. So
Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's an excellent show. So, um, I'm relatively new. I had one other podcast actually before Just Masons. That's probably like 2, 3 years ago. And I did like 6 episodes. It was with a friend of mine. It wasn't a Masonic podcast. It was called MemeFront. And we just discussed memes, popular memes that were going around the internet and like why
Oh
they
my
were
God,
effective.
this is like the best,
Yeah,
PewDiePie makes a whole career out of this.
true, true.
The dude's like super rich.
Right. And so, but these were like more about the sort of JPEG memes, the flat ones, not video memes or anything like that. But yeah, we analyzed them, as like kind of from a social science lens, like trying to figure out like, isn't it interesting that they put this as the backdrop, or how did the font impact it? We kind of just broke them down, and oh, it's funny, but it also has this insight, and it kind of leaves you thinking, and we just talked about that. But it also was just a launching pad for whatever stream of consciousness discussion we wanted to have. But we'd always have like 4 or 5 memes we'd discuss.
That is the coolest ever. You should do that.
Well, you could see it. It's memefront.org. I mean, it's dead. It's like, but there's 6 episodes posted still.
Oh,
so it's pretty funny.
I'm gonna repost it.
Yeah, MemeFront. And so, but anyway, I wanted to hear from you about your experience podcasting, because you probably have some wisdom to share. I'm in particular, I'm curious about just lessons you've learned over time with from the podcasting experience.
Yep. Yeah. I think the number one lesson that I've learned from podcasting was, again, like I said in the beginning, I was releasing kind of sporadically when time allowed. And when I finally hit a point where I was able to release every day, I was releasing on Monday mornings. And I figured, Monday mornings are too hectic for me because, I'm at work.
Right.
So let me do Sunday nights. And then they would upload to iTunes, and when you would sync your phone. So I was doing some background research, like how does this work? Most people plug their phones in. That's when they're backing up and downloading new content. So it'll be ready for you on Monday morning. And that's kind of what I went with. But then the storm happened, and we lost power for like 5 days. My kids are walking around to the neighbors offering candles and stuff because we had,
wow,
extras. And so in the week that I didn't produce an episode or two, people were emailing me like, hey, is the show dead? And I'm like, dude, like, this is crazy to me because I'm just Joe Schmo, like
right,
some Masonic papers or whatever, right? But you start to realize that people get somewhat attached / dependent, not in like a crazy way, but like they look forward to the content. They want something because there's a ravenous appetite for this stuff, even today, even in this kind of resurgence that we're seeing in Masonic education. And so I think my number one lesson that I had learned about was this idea of consistency. And we see it time and time again. I love Masonic podcasts. If I'm being brutally honest, I think one of my one of the most sad things I see, right, is like a really cool Masonic podcast will come out and it will last about 6 episodes, right? Like you said, you had 6 episodes,
right?
And you get about 6 episodes in before the guys. What happens is that the people behind it will say, "Okay, yep, this is cool, whatever. We did it." And the accomplishment factor sets in. And so now they think like, oh, it's easy to do whenever we want. I don't feel like doing it right now. Let me push it out for another week. And then if there's more than one person involved, they go, oh, well, let's go to a bi-weekly. And then they go to or a bi-monthly rather. And then they'll go to like a monthly. And then all of a sudden they just kind of forget about it, don't talk about it, and pretend that they closed the show when in actuality they just let it die.
Yeah.
And we there, if you look at somebody finally did like kind of a wiki type thing where it lists all of the Masonic podcasts, and there's like 60 of them or something. And so many of them are dead. And so I would just say the consistency, being honest and upfront about how much time you can expect to do it. If you're going to edit for content, so not do live stream or anything, then it makes it a whole lot easier if you have no production cost. Production costs being like, paying for license-free music or whatever to use and all of those kinds of things. Sure. But then there's the kind of the niche area or the niche area, which is, what are you going to talk about? And of course, in the Masonic circles, everybody's kind of like, there's no competition in Masonic podcasts because all of them have a little something different. And
Right.
I think just the nature of Freemasonry says we don't really have competition in this. It's more of like the mission is Freemasonry. So the more, the better.
Exactly.
So that's always something that's cool. So if you're thinking about getting into Masonic podcasting, that's rad. The more the better on the landscape, but just be honest about your time commitments and making sure that you're releasing on time, whatever that is. Like, get it done and schedule the release and then go about, the rest of your business and watch your movies and eat your Fritos or whatever. But it's like,
yeah, that's an area where I haven't gotten in my own podcast here. I don't do anything on any schedule at all. And I don't do it live. I record them and then release them. But, I'm thinking about maybe I've come down to be about once a week now because I've been busy. In the beginning, I was, sometimes I even had days where I did 2 in a day, oddly, just because I had a couple of people I wanted to talk to and I had time and let's do it. But yeah, I haven't got a set schedule and I don't know if I should or not. And I don't know if I should do like a live one once in a while. Maybe once in a while, a live one would be fun for people. Like once the show gets going,
Well, I think your show has gotten going. I mean, you were mentioned already in Masonic publications right off the top, which was the coolest thing ever to see a newcomer to the game get recognized.
I was surprised by that. I was like, I didn't even know the publication, the Square magazine, right?
Square magazine. Yeah, I think they're new. I think they're newer, and they're looking for a little bit of recognition by, recognizing other people in the spheres. And it was just really cool to see you in there. And I think recognizing some of the newer like Masonic podcasts that have come out is really helpful because it helps keep the steam moving, right? Like I think this show in particular is really cool because it's my wife said, "Oh, that's neat. What is this show like? What are they about?" And I said, "Well, if you could imagine the show comedians in cars drinking coffee, but instead it's like Masons."
Yes.
My wife goes,
"That's a perfect description."
She goes, "Oh, dang, that's awesome." And I was like, yeah nobody's doing that at all. So that was really cool. So consistency and being honest with yourself on the time commitments. And even if you're not like consistent like this show, but people know that you're there and that you drop episodes every once in a while,
Right.
And it's like, that's cool.
Yeah. And so it's kind of a surprise too. You never know when something's going to drop, and I don't announce who's coming on my show.
Yeah.
So it's just like, boom, all of a sudden, oh, Jamie Lamb's back, or, oh my God, look who's next, And I kind of think that's cool. There's a surprise factor there. Excellent, brother. So let's see some other things. So many questions here. I don't know if we're going to get through them all, but I'm gonna pick and choose now.
Sure.
I might just go into some of the fun stuff. Rose cross symbol. Why I put that in there in particular is because I'm researching that right now. I'm just starting some research into that because I'm going to be interviewed on the Unknown Philosopher's Show, which is also a cool new podcast with Briggs. And that's going to be in September. So he wanted me to come on the show and ask me what I want to talk about. He was like, well, maybe you could talk about the Kabbalah or something. And I don't know. I just felt like I want to talk about something more with Rosicrucianism. And I just thought, well, that's so big though. And I just know so little. So let me focus and find one very clean focused topic that I can dig into and maybe have a more complete sense of confidence about talking about it. if that's possible. But so I thought, let me just talk about the rose cross as a symbol and what the different meanings are that are
Yeah.
out there and how it's been interpreted. So I want to collect some of your just thoughts on it. Like, well, how
Yeah.
is it? How have you seen that symbol, and what's it mean to you?
So the Rose Cross in general is such a unique symbol because um, when I approach something like that, I'm always looking for the beginning. Where did it come from? And who said it? And why does it matter? And so I keep looking at things like that. Like when I research religions, right? Like you just go back and you go, as humans, we have a tendency to do a couple things. One is literalize things and make them and put them into timelines because for whatever reason,
Right.
humans like a timeline because we deal in space time.
Right. Right.
and so there's yesterday and tomorrow and today. So we do that. And then the other thing that we do is we like to say, where did it come from? Because that must be more correct. And so like when you do biblical studies, you look at where things came from, but then you pull the different books and you say, well, this one is in, 1005, this is 1002 CE. And they say the same thing. Let's pull in this other book from 15 years later, and it says the same thing, only 10 words are removed. So what's going on here? Who wrote these and what's the relation? You're doing all this comparative study on the text.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I approached a lot of that stuff. And most of my research on Rose Cross really came from looking at not only Rosicrucian documents, um, foundational documents that came from those three manifestos,
Right.
but also a couple of my really good friends are members of AMORC or AMORC.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's contention that exists between AMORC organization and Masonic Rosicrucianism, um, where one is, which is interesting, right? Because they're
Mm-hmm.
kind of similar, but kind of not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Masonic version, there's a Christian element that needs to be met, whereas in AMORC, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in fact, it's probably more Egyptian.
Right.
But so
More
I got
kind of
two.
metaphysical, almost new age too. How's that touch to
Yeah,
it?
that's
Yeah.
that's right. There's a book right next to Manly P. Hall's book that's sitting right here. It's a thinner book, but it's just
Mm.
as tall. It's a Rosicrucian book that I was given by a really good friend of mine. I won't say his name because I don't want him to get in trouble for giving me a book. But the premise, not of that book or anything, but what I gather from this symbol really is that it is the onion. It's like, okay, here's the rose. Now, what's the rose? The six-pointed rose or whatever. I actually just read a piece for the show this week on Whence Came You that came from the recent Knight Templar magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And in it, there's a guy, his name is Sir Knight Theodore Bergfeld, past
Hmm.
commander. He did this piece on labyrinths and mazes
Oh wow.
in cathedrals. And one of the things is the idea that through kind of mathematics, you outline the six-pointed rose or the six-petaled rose. And so with that idea, you go, well, what's with that? What's with the rose? When you flatten, it's the rose, okay, the petals, the 6 points. Then you go into where that comes from, and you really start tracing it. Um, the They use the cruciform, so the unfolded cross or whatever,
Right.
and then you go into a lot of different symbology that can branch off into Rosicrucian as in Christian Rosenkreuz and all of
Mm.
these things. But really, what I find that it comes down to is the allegory as a transit of Venus. Um,
Uh-huh.
so the transit of Venus in the night sky, as it goes around, it forms this pattern that it was called the rose,
Huh. Oh wow.
right? And then
Oh,
when we
that's
look at,
deep.
and so yeah, and
Because Venus is like Eros and love and Aphrodite and
yeah,
the whole Rosicrucian thing is at the end of the day about this caritas, love.
yep. So So then you've got the Rose Cross, right? And then if you go back to say something maybe perhaps Albert Pike writes, he talks about Lucifer being Taxel loves to call the whole Lucifer Jesus thing, or Lucifer thing, but really he's referring to Lucifer as the light bearer, the bringer of light to the world, and in his case, he's referring to Christ Jesus. And so then in the Rosicrucian sense, you've got the sense of the rosy cross coming through as it's the rosy cross, the cruciform, the rose, whatever, tied back to Venus, tied back to the idea of the light bringer, tied back to the idea of Christ. So it's kind of like a circle, right, of what it seems to represent. And I'm by no means an expert, but these are just what I've pulled when looking at it. And we see just a lot of the whole processional stuff that happens in terms of relation to gods, deities, and symbols, with things like I said, that procession, like Venus and how it goes around, and when it's traced. There's a Lamb's first book, that Myth, Magic, Masonry, does a really good job of talking about procession and things. But it really seems like most religions, you go back to one point and it's all about the procession and the seasons. And then it seems like before that, it goes straight to what was called animism, right? The worship of animals and whatnot.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a member of AMORC also, but I mean, I'm not very active. I think I'm in my second year, and I always get the monographs and stuff, but I don't always have time to read them over. I got this backlog of PDF documents that they give me for education that I have to look over. But in there, one thing I kind of like their explanation of the Rose Cross, or at least the one I read in some of their documentation, that the rose is sort of the unfoldment of the soul in a way, through life experience and the gaining of wisdom. It's that process of that blossoming of your soul, and that immortal part of you in some way. And then the cross sort of represents that intersect of heaven and earth. Earth being the horizontal, right, and the vertical being the connection to the divine. And it's only through that intersect, it's only through the Sophia coming into this world of matter to have a concrete experience that rose can then blossom from that seed that comes from that point that's in the middle of the cross. So I like it. It's a beautiful symbol. And it also is comes in Kabbalah. They talk about the point within the heart. And so the idea is that this rose comes from the heart. There's also the idea of the rose cross, rose croix in French, because, some of the Rosicrucians, I think before they came into England, they came from France. And before that was probably Italy, from the Renaissance, like Florence, and then maybe the Medici family. And then before that, some Greek folks, and before that, Egypt. So when it was in France, it was called Rose Croix, which is French, for Rose Croix. Rose in French means the red color, means red, rose, and so, rouge is also red, but rose is a rosy color. So, I mean, I don't know. I see connections also with just the idea of the red cross. Being the rose cross. And some would say in heraldry, red is the color used to depict gold. So that's the gold and rosy cross type stuff that, like in Germany, that they had that order.
Yeah. Well, you look at kind of where, so Masonic Rosicrucian seems to come out based on manuscripts produced at a much earlier time, which are then kind of, there's a lot of spurious stuff that happens between the creation of Masonic Rosicrucianism, moving into kind of the practical magic element of Rosicrucianism, which later comes out with MacGregor Mathers, based on his interpretations of some other manuscripts by Ed Kelly and John Dee and things. And Ed Kelly doesn't have the greatest reputation for being correct or anything. So
Mm.
there's like Fräulein Spreckler or something. She's the one who supposedly has this document that gets transferred through. She's, an initiate in the She's a living Rosicrucian, one of the people who knows the secret of the location of the hectagonal, place where Christian Rosenkreuz is supposed to still be
Oh, wow.
lying
Yeah.
in alive or
That's
whatever.
sort of like looking for the treasure of the Knights Templar or something,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah,
has
yeah.
that same kind of feel.
Yeah, so McGregor Mathers, right, forms with some other folks. These guys form the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, right, and then
Yeah.
comes over to the United States. Then it's Alpha et Omega, and then there's like a shutdown and a resurgent with Chick Cicero, and so there's this really wild stuff that happens, and all these people really spin off of the idea of Rosicrucianism. Like all of your appendant bodies, I might say, are at least influenced by the ideas set forth by some of the original, more quote unquote occult type orders within Freemasonry. Like the first
Mm.
official Rosicrucian order outside of being a legend is a Masonic one. And this is like, like just crazy to me. And then born out of this Masonic body is a non-Masonic version for practical, folks, men and women both join, and then it spurs off from there. And then in the
Mm-hmm.
early 1900s, you get Amorc, and it's just wild to see. But really, like, even so, I'm a member of Boda, which came from Paul Foster Case, and Case was a member of Golden Dawn, and he left. He was expelled from that by Mathers's wife, Moena. But
Oh,
like,
really? Huh, interesting.
yeah, totally hilarious story, but
Oh,
for
man.
another time maybe.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a fun one.
Yeah, but I think you got a good handle on that. I think the whole idea of spirit material kind of meeting, and
Yeah.
the similar message of equilibrium comes into
Yes.
play.
Right, and the whole idea of the marriage of heaven, earth, and the six pointed star, and the whole water and fire connection.
Yes.
And then, I don't know, there's a lot of interesting tracks too. The whole idea of the line of Cain and Seth and the Rosicrucian tradition. I think didn't you do a show about that in Whence Came You at some point, or you touched on that?
I may have touched on the idea of Abel and Cain,
Right.
oftentimes, and that's due to who is it? Robert Alter's translation of the Pentateuch,
Mm.
Which basically says that Cain and Abel, it's actually like apeful or something. Like the name isn't actually a name; it's an action
Mm-hmm.
or descriptor of the guy who's about to die. So, viewed under the lens of that kind of a thing, the whole Cain and Abel story is not necessarily a story that you're reading that's been, literalized or anglicized.
Mm-hmm.
If you read it grammatically correct, and in context of how the language works in the Hebrew, then it tells a totally different story that's not anything like what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I've talked about a few times.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I might do something on that at some point, like a presentation on that, because I think there's a lot of things that people don't know about the sort of Rosicrucian temple legend and sort of the extended story there, especially coming from, I don't know if you've read Max Heindel's book, Freemasonry and Catholicism. Have you
I
heard
have
of it?
lots of Max Heindel on the shelf, but I don't have
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's a good one. That goes into the whole Rosicrucian legend pretty well. All about the molten sea and the project of Hiram Abiff to bring sort of water and fire together. Really
One
interesting
like where he
stuff.
gets like sucked in and there's a gin.
Yes, and he meets Cain.
Yeah.
The father of his bloodline or whatever, his great grandfather. And so it makes it clear that Hiram Abiff was in the line of Cain, and the whole idea that Freemasons and Rosicrucians are somehow half God, half human. And then Seth and the Sethians were 100% human because they actually came from Adam and Eve having a baby, Whereas Cain, they say, came from Eve with one of the Elohim, impregnated Eve, and that's where all these like people that think too much came from, basically.
Yeah.
Philosophers, artists, scientists, whatever you want to call them, crafty people.
There was an interesting argument made that we look at all the stories in the Bible philosophically or through a lens of storytelling or allegory or painting a picture, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
in a flowery way, that even the serpent are intimate. And this is where Cain comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. And who's the serpent, and that's the whole,
Exactly.
who's behind that. It's very interesting stuff. So maybe I'll finish with a couple last questions.
Sure.
I want to talk about this idea of the Masonic Renaissance last. And
Okay.
so before that, I don't know. I just want to know, like, what are you researching recently? Like, what's your interest? What are you looking up on Wikipedia? What book? Or I don't know. Are you preparing for a presentation and you're digging into a rabbit hole?
So right now, my project is I have three major projects that are what I'm working on. One is I am preparing a short text with quips from other people about how to start a Masonic lodge that's born out of the idea of, you don't get what you want. It's time to make what you want, right? So I'm working on that, which I'm hoping won't take long. I'm doing a real lean process on it, which is like basically write it, bring in the stuff, edit the hell out of it, and give it to somebody to edit the hell out of real quick, and then we're going to push to publish right away. So not long on that, probably under 100 pages.
Okay, cool.
And then the other two projects are, one is the book on the occult anatomy. I'm really trying to finish this up. Right now, I'm in a phase where I need to dump in a bunch of explanatory pieces on the different parts of the different orders. So right now I'm finishing up a part on dissecting just the main 7 chakras. I shouldn't say main, that's wrong to say.
Right.
Dissecting the system of seven.
Out of the 67 or whatever, the main
right,
7.
because there are tons of systems of chakras, right? So
Right.
I can't say main, but probably the more westernized idea of the 7 chakras. I'm putting together.
It's pretty standard. I think most people think there's 7. Most.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, the number one best-selling book on chakras in the United States, I think, is still Ledbetter's book on the 7 chakras, which cool.
Oh, no kidding. I didn't realize he wrote a book on the 7 chakras, and that was a popular one.
Yeah,
interesting.
It's like
wow.
It's the book. Yeah. Still published.
He was a deep guy. Wow.
He was a deep guy. I think he was deep into little boys, but that's for another show.
Really? Oh, that's too bad. What the hell happened?
Well,
Oh, jeez. This was pre-Epstein too. God.
Yeah. He would have been on the island.
Yes. By the way, I just saw a temple on that island. Did you see the temple that's on that island? That's kind of creepy.
No way.
Yes. Look it up.
I'm gonna check it out.
His pedo island or whatever it was that looks like shaped like a bird flying the island from space or from the sky. There's a temple on there. It looks almost like a little small Jewish temple. Some people say, oh, he was Jewish, so he had his little synagogue or something. But it's weird. It's got like a blue dome. It's square. It's cubical. Got 4 arches around. It kind of looks like a kind of that Masonic archway type thing with blue and white stripes painted. And then outside on the ground around it is like these labyrinth kind of maze-like designs. I don't know why we don't know more about that. Why, someone hasn't done a documentary and inside the Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island, and we're going to go in the temple today,
Yeah.
Why aren't we seeing anything?
I don't know. The money, the powers that be.
Somebody doesn't want us to know what's going on.
Yeah. So working on this idea of these chakras and kind of tying all this stuff together for this occult anatomy book with a final chapter that'll talk about similitudes between all of them, and why you just need to believe and follow a specific path. And then the last thing that I'm still always actively researching, of course, is just the field of physics and things, and reading a lot of new papers that are coming out. Um, right now, I think one of the most exciting things that I was able to do was I got to watch a film as it was premiered with a live Q&A afterward with the guys in the film, and that was a film called Infinite Potential, which was about David Bohm, who was a famous physicist turned philosopher, worked with Krishnamurti for like 30 years, and Einstein loved the guy, and so did the Dalai Lama called Bohm
His boy,
his
his boy
scientist.
Bohm,
Yeah, yeah, and
scientist.
it's really cool stuff. And so really watching that film and then going, oh man, that paper that he wrote, where's that paper found? And I'm going to find his stuff and reading this. Um, and so just those are really what I'm diving into right now.
Just
Like I
not
said,
enough time in the day, though. It's
there
amazing.
there really isn't. So it's like I find I've got a to-do list, and every day I'm checking stuff off, and I've got a daily list, and my daily list has gotten to a point where it's like, I don't know if I'm going to get my daily list done, let alone
I know. It's
using off the other one.
things
But
are just getting harder and harder in terms of time management and getting things done. And I've got like a stack of books. I can buy books once in a while, and then I don't have time to read them. So I have all these books lined up, and I
yeah,
just look at them and I want to read them so bad.
yeah, I think a lot of us we suffer from this idea that we have to pick something up, read it from start to finish, put it back before we pick up the
Hmm.
next one, and
That's a good point.
that's
Yeah.
just not like you got to break free from that thinking. I know people go, I just can't, I just can't, I just can't, and there's this real dissonance about it. But really,
Hmm.
yeah, just pick it up, look
Yeah.
through the chapters, pick one, read it. If you like it,
Yeah.
keep reading. If you don't, put it back and grab a new book and check
Have
that out.
fun with it. Yeah. And make
Yeah,
reading a pleasure. And
life's
it
too
doesn't,
short.
it's true. No, I like that idea. And if you end up, if a book ends up being super good, you might end up reading it all. You might not. You might read
Right.
half of it,
That's right.
and then you've got enough. You may come back to it later and try to pick up the rest. But yeah, that's kind of what I do actually. I
Yeah.
rarely go from beginning to end in a book. That's less common.
Yeah.
Um,
Right now,
so
I'm reading a book on Skinwalker Ranch of all things. Uh, I've got kind of a secret, but not really a secret. If you know Ben Williams of Rocky Mountain Mason,
I
he and I are
don't.
going to do a little Skinwalker Ranch project, but it'll be
Oh,
pretty cool.
interesting. Okay. Cool, man. So finally, last thing I wanted to get your perspectives on is, a lot of people have been talking about a Masonic renaissance. I think in the beginning of COVID, I had mentioned a Masonic revolution,
Mm,
and I think that rubbed some people wrong. And I understand why. It's because it's not a violent thing. I mean, any kind of change is a kind of could be considered a revolution if it's a big one. But I like the term renaissance better personally, because I love the Renaissance, and I know that Masons and Rosicrucians definitely had a hand in that. Um, and so I kind of feel there is a Masonic Renaissance happening in terms of education, and there's a lot of this occult knowledge
mhm.
that's been sort of glossed over in Masonry over the last I don't know how many years, but I feel like there's a growing interest in wanting to know what our symbols really mean and the deeper meaning and sort of really getting at that idea of this lost word. What are your thoughts?
You know, there's a philosophical thing that says something along the lines of anywhere there's a difference, there's a conflict.
Hmm.
And conflict meaning like, you know, use the idea of perhaps, the Abrahamic faiths, right? There's three big ones, Christianity, Judaism, and Muslim faiths.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're different. So there is a conflict, but we choose not to see it.
Right.
And so when I think about that and you use that term revolution,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true. Like
Mm.
we can say all day, we can call it whatever we want. It's kind of
Right.
semantics really. And it sounds awesome, enlightenment or a renaissance and Freemasonry. And that sounds really cool. But a revolution is probably what it is. You know, there is a difference between what is coming and what was. And
yeah. And COVID is catalyzing that to some degree.
you know, it really is. It's truly, I can't say it was amazing because it still is amazing to me that the second lodges couldn't meet, all of a sudden things like refracted light pop up. And these brothers come together to put together presentations and essentially offer the reason I went to lodge, not in lodge. And so this does a couple things. It says, holy crap, you've set a new standard. How are we going to offer this now? And it also...
Yeah, because there's clearly a demand and people want it.
That's right.
You have that proof.
Yeah. And
so
if you're
lodges need to think about that.
That's right. If you're not going to offer that in a lodge, I'm not going.
Yeah. Well, we go back to how much time do you have in a day, right?
Right. I don't have time. I'm like, I pay bills already. I don't need any of that. Trust me.
Right.
So like there is literally zero, like, people might get mad at me. It's okay.
Yeah.
I love you all still, but.
And you don't speak for the Grand Lodge or this or that. You speak for Robert Johnson.
That's right.
Personal opinion.
My personal opinion is I don't need any of that. I didn't get into Masonry for leadership. I didn't get into Masonry for, Toastmasters or anything like that. I got into Masonry for philosophical and, kind of esoteric stuff. And while I enjoy a lot of what happens in a Masonic lodge, that's not the reason I go. And so it's not likely to be a reason to continue to go unless I'm going to a Masonic lodge that operates much in the same way I'm thinking about. And to do that, we had to start a lodge, really. We have a lot of brothers out there who are working toward bringing education into our meetings. And you would not believe, Jeremy, the emails that I continue to get that are like, what's the best way to start education at my lodge? Like just in the last year, and I'm thinking this isn't an issue anymore, but it clearly is. There's like rural lodges in, South Dakota somewhere where there's, this kid who wants to bring education. He's like, I said, you got to talk to your worshipful master. Say, I'd like to read this, or I'd like to do a little MSA talk or something. And they come back and they go, it went really well. And a couple weeks later, maybe they're stepping a little too fast. And they say something like, I tried
you got to pace it.
Yeah. And before you know it, he's like, I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know if I should be doing this anymore. Worshipful masters like pretty much put the kibosh on me doing any kind of thing, with Masonic education. And
yeah.
And it's just
it's tough. It's tough in a lodge. I mean, when it's not like an esoteric or like a, TO lodge or something, it's hard to get real deep.
Right. But
a lot of Masons are into that. Yeah.
It begs the question, like, what right do we have to go into an organization that has spent the last 100 years being the kind of typical experience, right? So meeting, minute, bills, charity,
ritual,
and history.
Right.
And it's like, okay, cool. What right do we have to go in there and change that? And the answer is maybe we don't have any right to do that. And so it then becomes this idea of like, I either have to start a lodge or recognize that Masonry might just be an outlet for me to find more people who think the way I do, and then do things outside a lodge with those people. Or
well, I mean, education has always been part of Masonry, and even in the typical lodge, they talk about we have an education officer, or we do education. But what that education really is often, not very deep, and often very short, if at all existent.
Oh yeah. I mean, even as the master of a lodge, I had, I have a lot of friends who were masters of lodges, multiple years, and I just did it 1 year. I was a master 1 year, and then I went on to do district education and a district deputy grand master for a couple of years. And I just was sitting in the East, and I'm sitting up there, and my junior deacon is sitting over there, who's a past master, is sitting there while education's happening, and he's like tapping his watch.
Oh boy, gotta
You know, and I'm
go.
just like,
Yeah.
dude,
Wait, who was doing the education? Was it you?
nope.
Oh, okay.
But
Was it a boring topic, or
I don't
did you
think
feel it
so.
was?
The guy was just going over like the different points in a degree and say, you know, what the symbols were on the tracing board and saying,
It
you know,
doesn't sound like
this is
it's
what this
dull.
means. It
Yeah.
could mean this,
Right.
you know, and trying to lead some discussion and asking questions to the audience about it. You know,
Right.
it was almost an oration. It was really good. I think it was my friend Ben. And I was just I was disappointed that it was still a thing to be hurry up. You know,
Yeah, come on, dude. 10 minutes. Keep it to 10 minutes.
It's like, no,
You know, keep it to 10 minutes.
I'll never forget. I was standing, greeting all the brothers as they came into the lodge to sit down, as I would do, and a guy said, "Hey, are we going to keep it short this meeting? There's a game on." And I said, "Well, if you just came here for the minutes, we in this state can email them. You can go home and you'll get them via the email." And that brother stopped coming to lodge after I said that to him.
Oh, wow. He was waiting for the email?
I guess so. And he got him. So that's fine. You know, it's like I took a stand there and I was a little bit of a jerk about it. But look, that's not why I'm here. And that's not why you should be here either. So
yeah. Sometimes the truth is hard.
Yeah.
But you know, people need to consider and reflect upon these things. So, but anyway, brother, this has been fantastic. I don't want to take too much of your Saturday away. So I know we've gone an hour and a half, which is, you know, one on the longer side for Just Masons.
Cool.
So this is excellent. So let's talk again and keep in touch, bro. This is amazing. And, you know, I have a lot of respect for you. And, you know, I feel we have a lot in common. So we have a nice connection. I can't wait till, you know, some of this COVID stuff passes and we can actually get together in person at some event and have a drink. And
I would love it.
It'll be really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And likewise, what you've built here with Just Masons is really, really cool. It's totally unique. And feels like kind of like lodge discussions, you know, sitting around.
Yeah.
This is good.
The fun ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I really enjoy it. So I want to thank you for having me on, and you know, I'll extend the invite. I'd love to have you come on WCY, something you're passionate about. Let's talk about it.
Cool, brother. Sounds good. All right. Have a great Saturday.
You too, man. Take care.
All right.